Today we're going to be talking about Chapter 6, Lesson 6. This is all about solving inequalities by using addition and subtraction. So one of the first things we're going to talk about is the process, and that's the same exact process as solving one-step equations by using addition or subtraction. The only difference is we're going to have inequality symbols instead of equal signs. So those symbols look like this. They look like little V's, kind of sideways a little bit, and some of them have little lines attached to them, and we'll talk about what those are. So this symbol here, this is called the less than symbol. Some other things that we can call it are fewer than, or smaller than, and those are just a couple of examples. The other symbol that looks actually very, very similar to that one is called the greater than symbol. And this symbol is the exact same, just facing the other way. And again, we can say that it's more than, bigger. Just a few more examples. Now we have some other symbols here as well. Very similarly to the less than and greater than symbols, the only difference is these have lines underneath. So this symbol here is called the less than or equal to. And we can say that it's no more than or at most. And over here, this symbol, instead of being less than or equal to, it is greater than or equal to. Another one we could say is no less than or at least. All right, now when we're graphing these, they're always going to be on a number line. And it's going to be kind of similar to when we did this with solving equations. Each one of these is going to be at a starting point. And when we have the less than symbol, normally what we would have done if it was x equals 3 is simply put a dot at that spot. But we're not going to do that in this case because it's less than a number, which means it can't be that number. So we're going to put an open circle there. And it's going to be pointing off in this direction. When we have the greater than, same thing, the only difference is it's going to be pointing off in this direction. And then just like the less than or greater than symbol, we have a circle, but this time it can be this number, so we're going to fill it in because this number can be part of this solution. And again, it's going to be pointing off in this direction. Same thing here with the greater than or equal to. It can be that number, so that means that number is going to be part of the solution, which means that we have a closed circle there. So when we have less than or greater than, the number that we're going to see is not part of the solution. When we have less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, that number can be part of the solution. And we'll see that coming up here. So first thing we're going to want to do is start solving some of these. So it says solve x plus 5 is greater than 12. So I'm going to draw the line down the middle. The process that I used to solve equations then was to get the variable all by itself. Here I have a plus 5, so to get it by itself I subtract 5. I now have x is greater than 7. We're going to keep the symbol just like when we did equations. We kept the equal sign. Here we're going to keep the inequality symbol, which in this case is greater than. Now, this one looks slightly different because it has an or equal to. But the process is still the same. So I'm still going to subtract 3 from both sides because I want my y variable all by itself. Negative 8 minus 3 is negative 11. And I keep the inequality symbol. Let's look at a few more examples here. So example 3, now we're going to have a fraction in here, but our process again remains the same. I want n all by itself, so I'm going to subtract 3/4. So I'm left with n is greater than, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because when we're subtracting fractions, our denominators have to be the same. And right now, 2 has a denominator of 1. So in order to get the two denominators to be the same, I have to multiply. 1 times 4 is 4. And 2 times 4 would be 8. After this now, I'm simply going to keep the denominators. And subtract the numerator. So 8 minus 3 is 5. So I'm going to have an inequality that says n is greater than 5/4. Or what the better way to write this is 1 and 1/4. Now when I start graphing this, I want to make each one of these lines 1/2 just because it's pretty easy and simple to graph something that's with a fourth if each line is a half, because that would show up halfway between two lines. And if I were to make each line worth 1/4, then I wouldn't have enough lines. So 1 1/4 shows up halfway between 1 and 1.5. Now because n is greater than 1 1/4, that means I'm simply going to have an open circle. And I'm going to have my arrow pointing in this direction. Now, one little trick that I like is I like substituting 0 in for n. So I'm going to let n be 0. So I'm going to say 0 is greater than 1 1/4. And what I want to do is I want to see if this is actually true or not. Because if it's true, then the arrow that I draw is going to be pointing towards 0. And if it's not true, it's going to point away from 0. So in this case, 0 is greater than 1 1/4 is not true. So I want to point my arrow, in this case, away from 0. So 0 is not part of the solution. Alright, example 4. Here's a word problem now. So it says Jerome took $20 to the store to buy a book and some CDs. If he buys a book for $4.50, write and solve an inequality to find the most that he could spend on CDs, and then of course interpret the solution. So the first thing we need to do is find important information. So Jerome took $20 to the store. That's important. He bought a book for $4.50. That's important. We want to find out how much he can spend on CDs. That's important. But because this is an inequality, I want to find out what symbol I'm going to use. And in fact, that is right here. Right here, where it says the most. If I look back at my table, most shows up in this symbol right here, which is going to be less than or equal to. So I'm going to use that symbol with this inequality. So I'm going to write that down so I don't forget that. Now the variable is always going to be talking about what it's asking me to find. So I'm going to say let C be amount that he could spend. So he could spend some money on CDs, and he already spent $4.50 on a book. And that is going to be a total of the $20 that he brought. Now, to solve this, I'm going to draw a line down the middle, and I want to get C all by itself, so I subtract this 4.5 from both sides, because this creates a zero pair, and I'm left with C is less than or equal to 15.5. Now, I'm not done yet because it does say that I need to interpret that solution. So the solution is, again, C is less than or equal to 15.5, and what this means is Jerome could spend at most $15.50 on